Josh here, and I'm ready to kick off a new series about Jonah called God of Mercy, Jonah, and this is part one. And I really want this to be kind of an introduction a little bit into the world of Jonah. Jonah is really a story about what is God's character like. What does he intend for the world, even beyond Christians or followers of his? It's a book about, yes, Jonah, but I would actually say that it's a book about us, the reader. I think you and I are more like Jonah than we'd like to think we are. It's a story about what it means to disobey God's calling. It's a story about not loving the people around us and what it means to be bigoted or hate people. And yet God has different ideas. He wants to love all the world. He wants to love all the nations, not just those who follow him right now. And of course that makes sense because before you and I ever stepped into a relationship with Jesus, we were Jesus's enemy. So he loves all people. Jesus is for all people. And this is a story about how we need to rewire ourselves and to pursue God in faithfulness so that we too are a people who are for all people. Jonah chapter 1. Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, "Arise, go to Nineveh, the great city, and call out against it, for their evil has come up before me." All right, the key to reading the Old Testament is if you don't know what the names are, just say it proudly, and say it confidently, and nobody will question you because, quite frankly, none of us really know how to say it, okay? Moving past that, right off the bat, we know this, that there is a prophet, and a prophet's job was to teach truth, typically to the Israelites, God's people. Well, in this scenario, something kind of crazy happens. Jonah gets the job to go teach or preach the truth to another group of people, the Syrians, in the city of Nineveh. Now, what's important to know about Jonah was he was a nationalist. He was somebody that was pro-Israel. I wouldn't say necessarily anti all foreigners, but he certainly was anti-Assyrians, their enemies. Jonah, being a good prophet, was more focused on Israel getting their heart right with God, but had little to no interest in any other nation outside of it. And yet, right in these first few verses, we understand something crazy about God. God is not just focused on Christians or believers or Israelites. God is focused on all nations. The other thing to know is that even when a nation doesn't know God and pursues atheism or communism or Buddhism or whatever it is, God still intends to judge all people. He has authority over all the nations of the world, not just Christians. And so in this particular passage, he's saying, hey, listen, the Assyrians are sinning against me greatly, and I'm going to bring judgment against them because I'm the God of all people, and I have to show my authority. But you, Jonah, are going to go warn them. You're going to give them the opportunity to save themselves from my judgment. So I had to do some historical digging up the Assyrians. What was so bad about them? Well, they were hyper violent. These were people that would literally cut one arm off of someone they captured and then their two legs, and they would leave one arm on so they could shake that person as they died and made eye contact with them. These are not good people, okay? The other thing is they typically, after raiding a city or a town, they would put the soldiers' heads up on pikes and kind of parade those around, mocking them to show just how aggressive and how much alpha they were over their enemies. There's a whole bunch of other things the Assyrians did, but to put it frankly, these are not good people. So for God to put judgment against Nineveh, it made sense. They were wicked. It would be easy in this story to look at Nineveh and all their wickedness and go, hey, blow them up, God. Do the worst you can against them. They're evil, they're monstrous, destroy them. And I know this is how Jonah felt because we get to see his reaction to God commanding him to actually go and save or at least warn Nineveh. Another way of saying this would be like God calling you and I as a prophet of his to go to Al-Qaeda or ISIS and to warn them against their wicked ways. As far as Jonah's concerned, he's going, why would you send me to to them. They're the enemy. You should destroy them, God. Why even give them a chance? And that's some of our hearts too towards our enemies, whether that's on a personal level or, like I said, against ISIS or terrorists. We want them destroyed, and we haven't even considered, how does God feel about these people who, yes, are their enemies and yes, are wicked, but God also says that you and I were his enemy. And so just like they should be destroyed, so should we. So right off the bat, we get a little glimpse of God's character, that he's a God who, even despite their evil, wants to give them mercy and warning to step away from the life they're living. So you have Jonah, who is pro-Israel, hates the Assyrians, and he's going, you want me to do what for them? First of all, they're not going to listen to me. They're going to put my head up on a pike and parade me around. And why should they get mercy, God? They're monsters. Just destroy them. So Jonah's reaction shows exactly how he feels towards God's commandment. But here's the thing. Sometimes God commands you and I to live in such a way that doesn't make sense. In fact, he might ask us to love someone that we quite frankly hate. He might ask us to give the gospel to someone who has done nothing but wicked towards us. And that's hard to swallow. And it definitely was hard for Jonah to swallow too. Verse 3, but Jonah rose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare and went down into it to go with them to Tarshish, away from the presence of the Lord. Now again, delivering good news or warnings is the job of a prophet. So Jonah's actual job and calling was to deliver this kind of news to Israel, and now God's actually giving him the mission to send him to Nineveh. Jonah disobeys. He rebels. He runs away from his calling. And it makes me kind of think of my own life, and maybe some of the times that you've struggled with too, where God has called us to live a certain way, to have a certain character in him. Or maybe he's even asked you and I to sacrifice things in a way that honors him, but is costly to you and I. And I don't know about you, but I've had the same reaction Jonah had, which was, this doesn't make sense. I don't want to do that. It costs me too much. Or quite frankly, I hate that person and I don't want them to have mercy or your grace. God, I want you to make them pay for it. We've all, at some point, disobeyed God and walked away from the future that he had for us. We've all disobeyed God and ran away. I mean, it makes me think about years ago when I was in ministry and I just had it. I'd had it with pursuing God. I had it with living a life of integrity. I was working 2 jobs. I was doing full-time college. I was trying to live a life that reflected Jesus. I was trying to be honorable. I was trying to do all the right things. And I felt like my ministry wasn't going anywhere. We weren't getting enough students to show up. And this is when I was in Young Life. And I remember going to work and people were making fun of my faith. And here I am in my mid-20s watching all my work friends and buddies who weren't Christians go out and party and do spring break and have all this what seemed like fun or excitedness. And I had to keep saying no because this was the life Jesus called me to. And I was just burning out. I remember I had this moment where I was either going to continue to pursue a life of faith and a life of following Jesus, even though it was costing me what felt like losing friendships and losing out on fun and all that kind of stuff, or I was going to step away from my faith and just live life the way I wanted to. And so I decided to just kind of, we've talked about Samson recently. I decided to be like Samson, just to live my life as I wanted. I was like Jonah, where God had given me commandments and had shown me the way to pursue him in a way that was full of life and so on and so forth. And I just frankly said, no, I'm running away. I'm going the opposite direction. And that's what Jonah does. Not only does he say no to God, he gets on a ship and literally goes as far in the opposite direction as he can. And the truth is, you and I have had these moments too, where we know what God wants of us. We know how to pursue Jesus. We know we should be making the right choices, but instead we turn away from God and we run the opposite direction. Truth is, I had fun for a little bit. And that's the way life works, actually, is it offers you fun and you get it, and then that fun kind of stops happening after a while. You know what I'm talking about. Where it's like you're partying, or you're living the life you want to, or you're living your life to the fullest and just being self-absorbed and selfish, and it's all about me, 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 me. And then we find ourselves in a space where I'm doing all the things I wanted to do, but I'm depressed. I feel lonely. Something feels off. Doesn't really feel like I have much purpose, or there's really no real excitement to it. It becomes dreary. And I realized very quickly that the people I thought were having fun ended up not being fun at all. They were even more miserable than I was, and they had no hope. At the end of the day, even though I had walked away from my faith and gone the opposite direction, I still knew there was a God who loved me despite myself. I still knew there was a God who was willing to give his life up for me. They didn't have any of that. There was no hope. It was just kind of going through the motions of life, being miserable in it, and then pretending they were having fun, right? They're posting it on Instagram, posting it on Facebook, posting it on, oh, look how fun we're having. But I knew that those same people, I was there in that same area where they got drunk and ended up making terrible decisions, or getting hurt, or getting their hearts broken, or you name it. It became pretty clear to me very fast that this life that I wanted was pretty shallow. And it actually didn't feel that great. And quite frankly, I hated it. I felt more alone and more depressed and more anxious than ever before. And now, on top of all that, I was making decisions that had consequences that came back slamming into my face later. So I always ask my friends, whether they're students or their peers, who are just kind of living life the way they want. And essentially, I'll ask this of my friends that are pursuing Jesus: how's that going for you? So I ask you the same question. If you've decided to run the opposite direction of God, how's it going for you? I bet when you lay down at night and you're all alone, there's no distractions, and right now with COVID going on, we can't even go anywhere, so we should have tons of time to self-reflect and really ask ourselves some hard questions. Do you feel that you're living life to the fullest? Do you feel like you're really making an impact in the world around you? Do you really feel that when you step into school, or you step into your house, or around your friend group, that you're impacting them in a way that makes them better people? In a way that brings them joy and peace, and are you showing leadership and positivity and all that good stuff? Or is the reality is, yeah, you're having fun, but that's it? I mean, if COVID has shown us anything, it's that all of our best made plans, whether it was graduating, whether it was getting on that team, or being first chair in that band, or finally asking that girl out or that guy out, or whatever it is for us, I think it's shown us that although we have hopes and dreams, the world doesn't care. The world wants to take things away from you and I. It doesn't care about our hopes and dreams. Scripture points out that you and I have an enemy who is always working against us, who wants the worst for us. And often the way that the enemy does that is by giving us the very thing we think we want. And then we get it and it turns out to be empty. It's kind of like fishing, right? You know, you put this worm onto a hook and you throw it into the water because that fish is hungry. And when it looks at that worm, it's like, yes, that's the thing I wanted. My life is going to be so great as soon as I eat this worm. And then boom, you've snagged it with a hook. Sin works that way. It's fun for a little bit, but before you know it, we're already hooked and we don't know how to get out. The worst part is, when I was running away from the Lord, I bumped into a lot of people looking to be saved, looking for help. And I felt so guilty and ashamed when I tried to share my faith, knowing that they knew exactly who I was and how I'd been living my life. It was that moment that I realized I want to have integrity. I want to offer life and hope to these people, but that means that I need to live a life back towards Jesus. I need to turn away from the sin and selfishness and move back towards Him, because I want to give these people who are hurting and crying out for some kind of help actual life. And I knew that that was only in Jesus. That wasn't going to be found in me or in them or in the world. The world just takes, it doesn't give. So that was really the moment that I had this clarity that I don't want to be this person anymore. So I need to make, that means I need to make a decision here, and it's either going to be towards Jesus or away from Him. And I'd already done the away from part. My friend, if you're somebody who's run the opposite way of Jesus, I'm encouraging you to turn back. I'm asking you the question, how's that going? Do you feel like you're living life to the fullest, or do you feel like it's kind of empty, that the thing you were looking for, you never actually found it? Well, turn back. Jesus will always welcome you with open arms. Just like Jonah ran the opposite direction and I ran the opposite direction, God loves us, His followers, too much to allow us to throw our future away. Verse 4, but the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea, and there was a mighty tempest on the sea, so that the ship threatened to break up. See, Jonah was only concerned about himself, just like I had been, and had forgot that there was an entire city that needs saving. There was an entire city that needed God. In the same sense, as I pursued my life in the way I wanted to do it and ran away from God, I had forgot that there was this world, my own friends, people I loved who needed Jesus. And when I smacked into that world, I realized how selfish I was being. They needed Jesus so much. And because of my selfishness, because of the life I had decided to live, they were missing out on God saving them. They were missing out on life to the fullest. So God has really two intentions in mind. One is that He loves His children so much, He just won't let you throw away your future. He wants the best for you. And so He's not going to let you just continue down that path. He's going to course correct you. The other reason He's doing that is not just for your sake, but because of your friend's sake. See, when we go off into a world of self-absorbency, we forget that the people around us are hurting us and need life to the fullest. It's not just about you. It's not just about me. It's about our friends. It's even about the people we would call our enemies, who need Jesus just as much as you and I do. God will never allow us to continue down that path away from Him. He'll make us feel that shallowness and that emptiness, and more importantly, He'll give us the consequences of the way we live. Now, we saw that in Samson. We're going to see it again in Jonah, but I need you to know that the heart of God is for you and for your best. And just as importantly, He's for the best of your friends and your enemies. And so often He has to trip us up to get us back in the place where we're living a life that is meant to give us fullness, peace and joy and courage and strength, so that we can share that with others. So I'm not the biggest fan of fast food just because I try to stay in shape and be healthy, but I do love me some Taco Bell, okay? Maybe because I'm Mexican, or it's just delicious, okay? I could eat Taco Bell probably every day. Here's the problem. Taco Bell, although delicious and probably a better choice than some of the other fast food establishments, isn't really that good for me. Okay, so here's the thing. The way fast food works is it's freaking delicious, right? It tastes good. And if you've ever watched the documentary Super Size Me, they have literally put ingredients in there to get us hooked on it. I'm not saying there's crack cocaine in fast food, but it feels like it, right? Like I really want that food so much. And why? Because it's good, right? It tastes really good. The problem always comes down to this. And maybe you're young and so your metabolism's still burning off weight, but this will catch up with you. I promise you that. And even if it doesn't catch up with you right now, you know the fast food gives you that lethargic feeling, that heavy, like, oh, I don't really have much energy and I feel like taking a nap. That heaviness is because what you're eating is not good for you. And if you were to continue to eat that day after day after day, you'd get fat and you'd be pretty unhealthy. Your sodium levels would go through the roof and you'd have issues for the rest of your life. But that's how fast food works, is it's really good, but not good for you. On the other hand, maybe you have like a good juicy steak and you got some potatoes and maybe some rice or some broccoli or whatever your thing is. And if you're a vegetarian, I don't know, quinoa or spinach or some conglomerate of a bunch of protein-filled vegetables. And you know that type of food's actually going to give you the protein and carbohydrates you need to get energized and stronger and just feel good. But in the case of steak, it's expensive. It costs more and it takes time to cook. And then you have fast food that's really convenient. It's easy, you know it's delicious, you know you want more of it, so why not go the easy route? Now, am I hungry and that's why I'm bringing this up? Probably. I'm always hungry and thinking about food. But there's a reason I'm bringing this up, and here's why. Sin is like fast food. Now, don't mishear me. I'm not saying it's a sin to eat fast food, sort of. But sin is like fast food in the sense that it's really delicious and you crave it. And the way it works is sin is designed to get you hooked on it, so you want more and more and more of it. The problem is it's not fulfilling and it's not nutritious. And if you do too much of it, it's dangerous for you. In fact, a life of sin leads to destruction, just like a life of fast food could lead to physical destruction as well. The alternative of steak is it's expensive. It's hard to cook, and maybe it's not as readily available as fast food is. And that's the life of pursuing Jesus, is even though it's way more nutritional, even though it's giving us life and making us stronger and better people, it costs too much. Salvation is free, okay? Jesus died on the cross for free, and you can accept that and have that without paying any cost. That's how good God is. But pursuing Jesus will cost us everything. And sometimes when we have cost everything and easy, cheap, and comfortable, it's human nature to pursue the easy thing. But the problem is that always catches up with us. And it never makes us feel good or feel happy or fulfilled. We should be people who want Jesus, and yes, it might cost us, but in the end, it always ends up being better. Matthew 13, verse 44. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and covered up. Then in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. I mean, imagine that you're looking at property, you stumble across the ground, you find a pearl, which is who knows how expensive and immeasurable wealth that you could have. So you go and you sell everything you have and you buy this field, which might be a pretty cheap, dingy looking field, but you know that even though it costs you money, there's even greater treasure found within. That's us pursuing Christ. Yeah, it costs us sometimes. It costs us on what we think is fun, or it costs us on reputation, or it costs us with friendships, or maybe being popular, or whatever it is. But it ends up being a better treasure than we ever imagined. It ends up meaning that not only do I have life and joy and peace and courage and strength, but I'm actually able to share that because I have endless amounts of that from an endless God, and I'm able to just give and give and give. And that wasn't something I was able to do outside of Jesus. I only had enough strength and energy to get my own, which meant I had to take from somebody else. I want to give you hope in Christ. If you run away from Jesus, I want you to know that He's always willing to welcome you back. He always has open arms. Just like with Nineveh, who didn't even know God, He's offering you the chance of mercy and grace. Run back to Jesus. Don't throw your life away for meaningless things. I want to save you years of your life that I wish somebody had just grabbed me and shook me and said, Josh, don't do that. Don't walk away from Jesus, because it wasn't worth it. And I wasted so much time, and there were so much opportunities I could have poured and given life to other people, and I missed out. I don't want you to miss out either. There are going to be moments in your life as a follower of Christ where God is going to ask you something that might cost you. But I'm telling you, it is always worth it in the end. Sin always has consequences. A life pursuing Jesus means a life filled with purpose and meaning and courage and joy. So even if it costs me something, even if it costs you something, it's always worth it. See, God knows who you're meant to be. And the only way for you to be the you that you need to be, to impact the world, to influence it, means you got to pursue Christ regardless of the cost. I love you guys, and I can't wait to see where Jonah goes next.